The new scheduling model for the ACC is out for next year and beyond. On today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast, we're discussing why 2024 is once again favorable in the ACC slate. We'll talk about Ron English's stellar defense in 2023, along with discussing the stars from the Duke game. So with that being said, let's get right on into the show.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. At this time, it is my honor to let you all know that today is a Grant Mulligan episode. Grant making his weekly appearance, State of Louisville football analyst. Grant, what's going on, man? Happy post-victory game week.
Great to be back. Always great to be on a post-victory episode. Always great to be second in the ACC. Hopefully, by the end of the season, first in the ACC with the ACC title.
The vibe.
Crazy that we're talking about this, though. I mean, it is absolutely. I won't take up too much time on this, but it's a huge testament to this staff and this team, because when you and I started discussing this team 9 weeks ago and before, I'm an optimistic fan, not overly optimistic, but I love saying we're going to win more than we are, but I would not have projected that we would start off this strong and be in legitimate contention for the ACC championship, like realistically. So yeah. 7-1. Feels fantastic.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Love covering this team this year. It's been a ton of fun. Great to be back.
And one of the reasons why this team has been so good is Ron English's defense. We're going to talk about that in the second segment. We'll talk about the stars of the Duke game. But beginning, we're going to talk about the major news that dropped on Monday evening, and that was the new ACC schedule. Now, if you remember last year, they adopted a model that essentially eliminated divisions. It made it to where you played the same three teams every year, and then you rotated five. So the three that Louisville were going to play was Georgia Tech, Virginia, and Miami. Now that has essentially been scrapped with the inclusion of SMU and Stanford into the ACC, and now it seems like it's just sort of a hodgepodge of different scheduling tactics, I guess. But the 2024 slate is pretty interesting because I feel like ACC wise, it's almost pretty favorable again, because you escape Florida State and North Carolina again. You essentially swap Duke for Clemson. Grant, initial thoughts on the ACC opponents for Louisville next season?
Yeah, I'm looking at the slate, and like you said, I'm once again happy to be avoiding UNC. I'm especially happy to be avoiding Florida State. And as much as I would love to get Clemson at home, I no longer fear them on the schedule. And I think this is, if we can build back the kind of team that we had this year, I see no reason why we can't have another stellar start like we did this year. I think we're looking pretty similar in terms of strength and schedule. I mean, if we're looking at it purely from a this year perspective, losing Duke and gaining Clemson is a net positive in terms of actual strength. Duke was a lot stronger of a team at this point in the season than Clemson. Clemson dropped to, Clemson's 4-4 right now. Duke we were only Duke's second loss, if I believe correctly. But Duke was a much stronger team this year, especially from a defensive perspective. So I'm looking at the schedule immediately. There's definitely some teams that can improve, some teams that can get better. Miami, of course, recruits well, so they're always going to be a toss-up. But aside from that, I really look forward to playing SMU. I think that's my favorite ad in the new ACC editions. I'm personally a fan of all of them, but I think SMU, they're a competitive team, especially in football. They put some really good guys into the NFL. So I look forward to having them at home first, but going on that away trip to Stanford, I think it's going to be great, especially for our California guys. But given the state of Stanford right now, I personally just feel like we're going to have a pretty similar year The game I'm looking forward to the most on this schedule, though, is the SMU game in terms of conference play. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to have them in the ACC.
Now, I mentioned how random it was. Granted, this may be just a result of that, but there are teams that Louisville will play more than others. Like Louisville plays Boston College 5 times, I think almost every season's almost. The two teams that I saw that they don't play a ton, most notably Florida State. They play Florida State 2 times in that span. Wake Forest is another team that they just simply don't play a lot. If you look at the ACC slate, the Cardinals don't play the Seminoles for the next 2 seasons. So
they don't play Wake until 27.
Right. Now, granted, I think that if you're a Louisville fan, you're kind of taking a little bit more of a sigh of relief for Florida State than Wake at this point, especially if Norvell keeps that program rolling. But, I mean, I feel like the way things are going and how random it is, I feel like it benefits Louisville. Do you feel like it benefits Louisville more now that things are so open rather than being in that 2-division slate? Because, I mean, look, let's be honest. The Atlantic was always tougher than the Coastal.
I agree with you, but with the current strength of how our team is, it's really hard for me to not see us being competitive in either format. But I think as it currently stands right now, Louisville is going to stand to benefit from the open format. And I don't see anything conceptually, I don't see anything wrong with the open format. I think that having the team or the conference's 2 best teams playing one another is the right way to go about it. Especially and with how many teams we have now, I think this is the best way to lay it up. And especially because now it's not as local. With it going conferences now going more national, it's harder to make it work geographically to where it makes sense. So I think in this open scheme, I think Louisville will benefit more from it. But with the way that the team's going right now with the trajectory, I feel like Louisville could truly be competitive in either format.
Not to go off the tracks too awful long, but overall thoughts briefly on, because we haven't talked about this really, on adding SMU and Stanford. Seems like and
Cal,
and Cal as well. Very, very. I know things are really unorthodox right now, but just those 3 teams is like SMU. I get, but the other 2, it's like I get the academic side of things, but from an athletic standpoint, what are your thoughts on adding those 3 for football?
Well, I know I'm the football guy, but for women's basketball, it makes me really excited.
Oh, it's fantastic for that. I love that.
So I really feel like Commissioner Phillips is looking at it as a holistic sports across the board, which I really respect, because a lot of people during conference realignment seem to pretend that the only sports that matter are football and basketball, and that other sports are not affected by this in any way. So while it only adds 2 super long road trips, I think you've added a couple schools that, while they might not be powerhouses in football, they bring a lot in terms of other sports as well.
Right.
It helps diversify the ACC. It helps us in basketball. It helps us a lot in women's basketball. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. SMU makes sense from a mainstream sport perspective a little bit more. They're always an exciting team to watch in football. They've been having a lot of good talent, and I look forward to playing them. They're my favorite new add in terms of purely football. But I think that Commissioner Phillips and the ACC, they would look to add more than just men's basketball schools and just football schools. So
right.
I'm for it. I'm not really for the loss of regional conferences. I think it hurts a lot of the other sports, but that's a conversation for another time. And we weren't the ones who started it. So
you just kind of have to conform to the pattern or fall by the wayside.
Behind. So I completely agree with doing what needs to be done to keep the ACC relevant and to keep us strong within the national sense. So I oppose it conceptually, but we have to adjust. Like in anything, you have to adjust or get left behind.
Unfortunately, that is true. Transfer portal, conference realignment, whatever may have you. We're now going to, I guess, not go too deep into analysis just yet in terms of that Duke game, I want to talk about one thing that you mentioned is how the coaching staff and everyone's kind of bought into it. And I think that that really, really is shown through how Ron English's defense is succeeding. And we're going to sort of go below the surface a little bit with how that defense has been so successful here momentarily, after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, Gametime. Look, you shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime eliminates those worries. It's the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, it takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Like I said, lowest price guarantee. So what that means is that if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit 110% of that difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Once again, terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So, as we mentioned, this defense for Ron English has been incredible this season. And I know that you've got some statistics that you want to bring up, but let's be honest. I think that, at least from our perspective, I feel like we do a decent job of sort of assessing the pulse of where the fan base is. I feel like everyone came into the season really excited about the offense and sort of, I wouldn't say uneasy, but curious as to what we're going to see from this defense. And I'm not sure that really anyone saw what was going to happen.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And the fact of the matter is that Ron English did put some good defenses together at Purdue, but it was largely marred by inconsistency. I mean, they had an up and down defense. They had a lot of bright spots. They sent some guys to the NFL. But one of the biggest critiques, one of the biggest knocks about Ron English coming in as the defensive coordinator was the lack of defensive consistency. And they would have up games and then they'd have down games inexplicably. But this is a completely different story. And he has given a huge energy to this defense. The scheme is working. He's got the right guys already, which is crazy to me. How in year one, it seems to have layers and layers of guys at each position who really excel. I think they did. It seems like we talk every week about how great they were in the portal, but Ron English deserves a lot of credit for going out and getting scheme fit guys, not only guys who just fit the scheme, but really talented scheme fit guys with a lot of experience. And he sold everybody on it. I mean, it's not just one group who's excelling either. I mean, our defense is tied for 45th in the country in sacks. That's how we made all of our defensive presence last year, first in the country in sacks, second for most of the year. But we're able to do it from a number of ways. I'm going to share a couple of statistics. Like you said, I'm going to share a couple of statistics. We're 15th in the country as of this week, 15th in the country in total defense in terms of yards and scoring. Only tied for 45th in sacks. So it's not just the defensive line who's doing all the work. We're 9th. This is a huge one for me. We're 9th in third down percentage and getting the offense off the field really on third down. That's huge.
Yeah.
We're under 30%. Under 30% of third downs are converted by opposing offenses, or 29.2%. We've got the 8th fewest total first downs earned against us in the country. And we're the 3rd best red zone defense in the country. I mean, he's done a great job at every level, and it isn't just coming by lucky splash plays or fumbles bouncing our way. On a down-to-down level, we're limiting explosive plays. We're being able to keep them behind schedule. Like I said in the previous episode, key to victory over Duke, keeping them behind schedule. What did they do? Keep them behind schedule. And they've been able to do this consistently all year. No matter who's in the lineup, if somebody gets hurt. I think I was really concerned about linebacker coming into the year. He's had some stellar guys step up, make real plays, super deep at defensive back. I was really worried about losing MJ Griffin. Guess what? Devin Neal stepped up. Cameron Kelly stepped up. It's been great. I mean, it's a complete performance. It isn't just one area excelling. We're we're doing an excellent job as a team to keep offenses behind the sticks consistently and not making a lot of huge mistakes. So really disciplined defense, which is back on coaching, and the talent is bought into the system. They're playing really well. I'm just as surprised as anybody that we're this good this early, but huge credit to the defensive coaching staff because their preparedness is also off the charts. I mean, this is a defense that's ready.
I think we talk about Ron English a lot and for good measure, but I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the other guys. Mark Hagan is, I think, a pivotal part to this puzzle. Mark Ivy, keeping him on staff was key. Steve Ellis, that clip that he had in his press conference about, I don't know if you saw it, but essentially paraphrasing where, he said that his high school coach told him and that he tells, his players that play for the guy that's up at the very top of the stands so that they have something to remember and have a good time with. And it's just that to me, it's like, I keep coming back to this narrative that the staff just gets it. And that's extremely refreshing to me. And I'm not saying that the entirety of the staff in the last coaching regime didn't get it, but I felt like there was just so much disconnect between what the fan base was looking for and what the coaching staff was preaching. It just feels like, and people talk, well, why is Jeff Brom such a home run hire for Louisville? Because he understands this fan base.
He understands his fan base. He understands the city. Being able to recruit the city of Louisville is going to be huge for years to come as well. And that's not really the segment, so I'll cut it there. But like you said, the staff gets it. They're really, really connecting with their players. They're playing energized. They're playing ready. There's not a lot. One of the things I'm most impressed by, there's not a lot of situations in which we look out of position. We get beat on a pass coverage play. We get beat on that's football. You can't stop them all.
Right.
But there's very few times in which we look just unprepared for a look, or unprepared for a thing. Sometimes it's talent on talent, and that's the game. But huge credit for the coaching staff on the preparedness of this team and having our guys ready to play on a week-to-week basis.
What do you feel, if you had to pick one thing in particular that you want to see this defense get better at in the next, 4 games left? What's the main thing that you're looking at in terms of what needs to be worked on?
I think sometimes we'll have safeties miss late or miss deep assignments. That's one of the only things. And other than that, I think we're pretty sound across the board. It's just there's the occasional deep coverage lapse in which a guy didn't pass off correctly in zone or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a great idea, and it's been proven a few times to leave Minkins in deep coverage. It does not often end well.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm not trying to slight the player. I'm not trying to throw shade. That's just, let's call it what it is. So I think maybe not leave ourselves in exposable, especially when we're that deep talent-wise, to not put ourselves in exposable situations, because we have so much talent on defense to where I don't feel like we have to put ourselves in those spots. You know what I'm saying? Play the players to their strengths.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we keep with that, then there's no reason why we can't even further ascend. But it's really hard defense to nitpick because they've played so well week in, week out. They're climbing up the defensive rankings. They're stellar in the red zone. They're stellar on third down, which is something I wish I could say about my Chargers. But
why did you have to go there?
Hey, you know what? This weekend, I got a Louisville blowout win. I got a Chargers blowout win.
Buddy, I didn't cheer one time, and it was so sad, man. I just sat there and observed.
It's like,
it was like, man, I was like, because you're going to beat the Bears. And not to get off on a tangent, but you should beat the Bears. And if you don't, then Staley's gone. I'm like, man, we won, but at what cost? Now, if you beat the Jets, maybe there's a conversation to be had. But at this point, I'm in a low spot with this team, man. But regardless, let's get back on track here.
Positives, man.
One thing you mentioned really, really was exciting was that Louisville blew out Duke, and it wasn't really competitive at that point. We're going to talk about the stars of that game for the Cardinals here momentarily after we talk about our friends over at FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide spread of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and my favorite, the single game parlays. That's how you win your big money. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL. All right, heading into the final segment of the show with my good friend, weekly guest on the Locked On Louisville podcast, Grant Mulligan. He is the football analyst for the State of Louisville.com. Great X's and O's guy. I really like when he gets to talk about his stars of the game because it just kind of shows you, really, I think that it's a good indication of who's playing the best ball because there's a lot that goes into that analysis. Grant, I told you to pick two. Who's number one?
I'm going to go this is one less exciting because the big stars, the guys who we look to, shown the brightest. So number one, the obvious choice, Jawar Jordan. He carried the offense. We're a completely different team when he's on the field versus when he's off the field. Yep. He's explosive. He's one of the best backs, if not the best back in the country this year. At any time he touches the football, he has a risk to take it to the house. And it is great to have a guy like that in which any running play that he's handed the ball feels like you're throwing a deep shot downfield and you're waiting to see if it connects or not. He's that good. He's truly one of the most exciting backs I've watched in a while, especially for Louisville. And we've had some good backs, but Jawar has taken the step up this year that everyone thought he would and more. I mean, the MVP of this offense, MVP of this team, really. He was balling. And I could go. I can say that it was anybody else. I also want to throw love to the offensive line. That's a tough defensive line that they pushed around. A lot of guys, not just an individual performance, but as a group, they blocked really well. So honorable mention on offense to the offensive line, but I would be remiss to say anybody other than Jawar Jordan to be my number one player of the game.
It's hard not to go with Jawar. Jawar is having a fantastic season. I feel like I was going out on a limb in the summer saying that he was going to be the next 1,000-yard rusher. Now I'm like, I kind of feel like I undersold that because he could get that in the next 2 games. So, but regardless, he's having a fantastic year. He led an offense that had the most rushing yards against Duke this season, 234, which is a lot when you're playing that defense. For me, the star defensively, one of them, I'm going to go with Jermaine Lole. I feel like, is that where you were going to go?
He was my honorable mention.
Okay, Jermaine had a sack. He had a tackle for loss. He had 2 overall tackles, was very, very solid and instrumental to the defensive line this past week. Great to see him healthy again and really putting in that work. I'm going Jermaine Lole. I felt like he was a disruptor every time he played on Saturday.
I agree, and he was someone I was going to touch on as well. He was not only, it didn't just show up in the stat sheet, although he got those couple tackles, he got that sack, but he was getting consistent push against, granted, a little bit of a banged up offensive line, but a solid offensive line. He was getting disruptive plays in the backfield. If he wasn't getting the tackle, he was pushing the running back into another lane. Another guy who was doing that was Jared Dawson. Thought he had one of the best games of his career. The stat sheet isn't illustrious. He's got a solo tackle and a sack, but he was getting great push on his sack. I mean, he absolutely punked the guy. He looked great. I mean, he had a great push.
Right.
So I think he deserves it. He's a really under the radar guy, but the true star of the defense, we got just like on offense, the heartbeat of the offense, heartbeat of the defense, Ashton Gelotti. Yep. Could not be contained. 2 sacks. 2 solo tackles.
He's averaging a sack a game.
Which is crazy. Deserved. Hard worker, leader, guy you love to root for, and he just keeps coming up in big moments. Both of his sacks were extremely impressive. The one I loved was when he beat the right tackle right off the punch, slipped him, and got in there for the sack in like a second and a half. Super impressive.
I want to.
Super impressive.
I hate to interrupt you, but I want you to discuss this when we talk about Ashton Gelotti. How much more impressive is it now that he's continually doing this and taking another step forward with Yaya and Yasir gone, to where everyone is focusing on him and not just the other players as well, but the main focus is on number 9. How impressive is that he's been able to take that leap?
It's extremely impressive, and one of the things that I talked about early with him, and the only major knack that I had on his game was he had a lot of times in which he'd get into the backfield and wouldn't finish the play. And he has clearly been working on that because he's had so many fewer flyby misses. He's making consistent plays in the backfield. I'm not watching the game and be like, "Oh, Ashton, great rush. If only you had finished it. If you hadn't fallen off the sack." He's here. He's finishing those plays. It just took him a little time to get warmed up. And even when he was warming up, he was still great. So he's a force. He clearly learned some things from a couple of great defensive linemen and outside linebacker in front of him, and Yasir and Yaya. And he's got some other great guys working with him now. So I'm really excited for him. I mean, heartbeat of the defense, great leader, huge work ethic, really deserving guy. I'm happy he's making this impact. Can't wait to see his name called in this NFL draft and see him playing on Sundays, because this kid has sky-high potential.
I need a green room look on TV of Veronica and Ashton in that green room. I do. It is must-see television. Make it happen. I really think that he's going to have a great NFL career. One thing that really, really I think is the most encouraging thing for me is that it seems like every single week there might be one obvious answer, but when you start to talk about that second star, you can go with so many different players. And that's the beauty of what this defense is doing, is that it's not just like one or two players stepping up. It's all 11 on that side of the ball, and it's incredible. And that's a testament to the guys on the team buying into the coaching staff's philosophy. It's them being able to play with each other. And it's phenomenal. And I'm interested to see how this defense is going to do moving forward against here in a couple weeks against a Miami offense that's top 20. You have a UK offense that I believe is like a dormant offense, has the pieces of being really good, but just hasn't really put it together at times. So we'll see. But Grant, that's going to wrap up this episode of the show, the Grant Mulligan episode, weekly on the Locked On Louisville podcast. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here at the beginning of November. I had to think about it. I was like, what month is next?
Oh, happy Halloween. This episode should be going out on Halloween. So to all the Louisville fans, all the loyal Grant Mulligan Locked On Louisville fans, happy Halloween. I want to see all your Grant Mulligan Locked On Louisville costumes. Drop it in the comments below. I know there's a few of you.
Y'all hear that? I got to call an exterminator because I think there's crickets in my house.
Oh,
I'll have y'all know before. This is kind of a Locked On Louisville off script. We've got some time. I'll have you all know that Grant tried to make me laugh 9 times before this exact recording happened.
No, this is recording number 9 though.
The odds coming into the episode was Grant Mulligan to make Dalton Pence laugh minus 650. It was minus 650. Grant, I hammered those odds.
You should have. Look, and the thing is, I was not even trying like that. It's once it got rolling, I was in your head.
Grant's just being modest. He was
in your head.
Yeah.
Psychological. Once I cracked it that first time.
Don't let that distract you from the fact that he definitely started laughing the last episode.
Pull the tape up.
Pull the tape up. I rewatched it, and it's very clear that after further review, the call on the field is confirmed. You've lost your challenge. I apologize.
I don't believe it. Anyways, happy Halloween, Cards fans. Thanks for tuning in. Great to talk to you all as always.
We'll see y'all.